Welcome back to The Empire Never Ended. It's Boris and Ray.
Hey.
Hey! You may have noticed that Fritz isn't here. If you aren't on Patreon, then you probably don't know what's going on, but the show has balkanized slightly, and Fritz is off on his own. And we are here back at you with our regular but not so regular material.
Yes. It's Boris and Ray, like we always say. Boris and Ray.
Yeah, Boris and Ray. Boris and Ray, as we say.
Yes.
Yeah.
No one died.
No one
is except you. You could say that the David Myatt character died.
That is true, unfortunately.
Which is a big loss. I wouldn't say it's a tragedy, but I think I said it all when we didn't record, and I want to say it on record now that I think the David Myatt character was one of our greatest achievements, if not the greatest. It even got the David Myatt person to write to us.
Yes.
Who's just a pale copy of the David Myatt character. So that's a big loss, and I would just say David Myatt character, rest in power.
Agreed. Yeah, I also just want to, thank all of our listeners for being patient with us and for your feedback. That's always much appreciated. And as such, I think that we're moving forward. We're going to move away a little bit from the kind of mega arc model that we had been using for the entire show. Just because, for a few reasons, it's something that we were kind of meaning to do anyway. But it made sense at the beginning of the show when our arcs were a lot shorter, and now as they go on and on and on, some of them, well, this one's been lasting for well over a year now, I think. So yeah, I think it's just kind of, it's better for us to be a little bit more dynamic. So we'll still do like kind of deep dive episodes, but not follow an exclusively geographic mega arc where we only do America for like a year and a half, or we only do Balkan stuff for however long.
Yes.
And that way we're more flexible, and I think it's more fun for everyone. And I kind of see it as more of like what our inter-arc periods used to be like, I think.
Yes.
And so that's kind of, I guess, the biggest change that you can expect on the show.
Yes. But also, that's my hope, I would say, like, because the way we did, it was also kind of a reflection of how our brains work. It wasn't intentional that the arcs became so long. So it's going to be a struggle, I think.
It's true. Although there were times where it was like, oh my God, we still have undetermined amount of time left for American arc, and I just want to do something else now. And a lot of the times I'm reading other things, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll put that would be a great episode, but I'll put it off for whenever. No, we're not going to put it off for whenever. We're just going to do them.
Yes, exactly.
And yes, your votes have spoken on Patreon. We got a good idea of what kind of stuff you guys are interested in moving forward.
We had a kind of survey on Patreon, and our valuable patrons have spoken, and they said they want to hear less about American Nazis. So we see you, we hear you, and here's an episode about the American front.
It's true. Now, I should say this is one that we had planned. This was supposed to. We were supposed to record this one a while back. So we're doing it now, and it's also kind of an oddly appropriate time to do this exact episode because
yes, actually, someone did die.
Someone did die.
Kind of. Yes.
None of us, fortunately.
No, but we can. It's kind of a surprise for the end of the episode.
No, we can't leave him hanging. Should we leave him hanging?
Yeah.
Okay.
We should.
All right. Well, then listen to the end, and you'll find out. So yeah, this one was part of the regularly scheduled arc, but it's good stuff, I think.
Yes, and it's super, like, I mean, the fucking group is called the American Front, and they're just a bunch of fucking American boneheads. So it's exactly opposite of what everyone voted for.
Yes.
But
well, not everybody. It was...
Yeah.
There were people did want American stuff, but the Balkan stuff and the deep dives in history and ideology did slightly win out. So this is tossing a bone out to those that wanted more, that wanted America content as well. So do tell us, Ray, about the American front.
Okay, so these are the notes that I made weeks ago before nothing happened at all. So they're a bit scattered, and usually it's usually the notes are kind of, although I have many pages of notes, usually like 40% of them are in my head, and when time passes, it's kind of get lost a little bit. So maybe it's going to be a bit scattered.
You always say this, though.
I do, yes. So I don't know. Salvador Falcon, our producer, will maybe have a tough time, but we'll see.
We'll try to go easy on him.
He's a professor of jazz, which is in provisional musical genre, and maybe this will be a jazzy episode. We'll see.
Not something I commonly associate with American Front, to be honest, is jazz. Although the photo that you sent us,
well, they tried to be jazzy and failed. Okay. I will explain.
All right, I'm wrong, I guess.
So American Front, it's a bunch of American boneheads. That's what it is. And they tried not to be, or they tried to be a little bit interesting, and they failed at it. And they are just American Nazi skinheads, is what they are. But we are kind of closing our eternal arc about American fascism. And so I think the last episode we did was about Tom Metzger.
Yeah.
And so this is the similar era. The American Front are the closest allies that Tom Metzger had.
Okay.
And
so we're talking the 80s here, right?
Late 80s.
Late 80s, 90s.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Is when they were founded. So they were officially founded in 87 in San Francisco.
Okay.
But they had roots in the early 80s in San Francisco, and then come out of a punk scene. They were initially formed by reactionary right-wing punks from San Francisco in the 80s who hated the punk scene and reacted against the left-wing anarchist punk scene there. So one of the later leaders of the American Front, who we'll talk about in the end of the episode, who wanted to, pose as this kind of revolutionary leader, third positionist, he would always say the American never meant anything patriotic. It was always a revolutionary organization or something like that. Actually, the milieu that they came out of were right-wing punks who were shouting "Hail Reagan" and chanting "USA, USA" at punk shows, and and they were actually the original Nazi punks who were supposed to fuck off from the song.
Okay, yeah.
They are the people.
They're literally the Nazi punks fuck off.
Yes, they are the ones, and they did fuck off to Portland.
Okay,
their organization failed.
Pre-hip Portland, I'm guessing.
Yes.
So when you say punks, they were actually were they in the kind of skinhead scene, or were they kind of both?
I guess so. I think you would know more about this than I would. I think they are the American skinheads, which my impression was that they were kind of more coming out of the hardcore scene of the 80s.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing. They're not they're not British skinheads. They're more hardcore.
Basketball jersey dudes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Agnostic Front had some pretty reactionary songs, to be honest.
Well, one of the leaders of the American Front is actually from New York and comes from the same scene as Agnostic Front.
Sure. Okay.
And so that's the milieu they come from.
And I say this as a person who's gone to plenty of Agnostic Front shows.
Yeah. No, but so I'm not saying that, originally the people who the milieu that the American Front came out of in San Francisco in the middle 80s were not Nazis. They were right-wing patriotic skinheads.
Yeah, they didn't like the whole hippy dippy shit of the way that some of the punk scene was going.
So the first time the name American Front was used was something around 85 or something like that. It was a flyer that the future leader of the American Front, Bob Heick, would distribute. And it was signed as American Front, although the organization didn't exist at the time. And it was something, it was like addressed to punks, communists, anarchists, hippies, homosexuals, and other enemies of America and the American way of life.
Okay.
So that's what they would distribute at gigs, and this is where the idea of the American Front came out of, before the group existed. And this was like 85 or something like that. And the group itself was founded in 87. Somewhere it's stated that it was founded in 84 or 85. I think this is a mistake because of this flyer that was earlier thing. So the name of the group was inspired by the National Front in the UK.
Okay.
And it tells you, a lot. They were very Bob Heick was the leader of the group, who was a punk, a Nazi punk from San Francisco, who wasn't even I think he doesn't look to me like a skinhead. I think he was just like a Nazi punk, but he founded this skinhead group and became the leader of it. It is a kind of a right-wing reaction to all the anarchists and anti-fascists and anti-racists and the punks.
And the symbolism, I think, is also kind of reminiscent of the British National Front style. It is kind of it's an AF that's inside of basically in a Celtic cross.
Yes. Also could be partially inspired also by the crest symbol even.
Yeah, I mean it has a punk aesthetic to it. No, it looks like it could be a little bit Circle A, a little bit crass, but also quite obviously a Celtic cross too. Yes. Which a lot of Americans didn't really know about to the same degree as in Europe.
No. So Bob Heick was a big fan of Screwdriver, as he would say in his the interviews. He wouldn't even say Blood and Honor or something like that. I don't know if in the late 80s Blood and Honor exists. I don't know when Blood and Honor was founded, actually. But he was a big fan of Screwdriver, and this is what he wanted to emulate in some way in the US context. So they quickly... So what they are known for is that they were the first... It's usually stated that they were the first national skinhead organization in the US. Before that, you only had gangs, local gangs.
Right.
And this was the first attempt of US skinheads to have some kind of a political organization that would exist on the national level. And this is why they are usually singled out as significant in some way. Although I think they were never really that. I think in the end, they were a skinhead gang that had a couple of nerds who kind of tried to make it seem like it's something else.
Sure.
And it quickly degenerated into a gang, as you will see. So the late 80s were kind of a weird time, and it was a suitable time for a group like this to be founded because they quickly made a connection with relatively sophisticated bourgeois scene of pseudo intellectuals who today would be called something like the alt-right or something like that. And they made a connection with them. These were people that we will talk about in next episodes who were part of what would become the neo-folk and the industrial scene. Who were also members of the Church of Satan.
Right.
Yes. And who are the people who made James Mason's zine into a book.
Right.
These are the same people who Bob Heick was extremely friendly with. They were part of the same scene. And
this is kind of who the alt-right, the kind of more modern alt-right of the, 2010s wishes that they could be, right? This is still this kind of when these avant-garde weirdos in places like San Francisco were cool and getting into Nazi stuff and making it seem kind of cool to other
they try to do that at least. Yes, that's what they try to do. So and they had a lot of people from this scene today they try to portray themselves as like victims of the satanic panic or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Although in my view, it's quite the opposite. Like they kind of really, they were co-creators of the satanic panic, like because it suited them, it promoted them.
Right.
Like it's people like Nicholas Schreck and Boyd Rice and so on. They wanted to be very kind of shocking and to provoke, and they made this. It's like when we talked about Tom Metzger, who's very much part of this scene,
Mm-hmm.
when he said that his group War, White Aryan Resistance, had a kind of mutually exploitative relationship with the media.
Sure.
This is what these people did. I mean, they are
Which
part of the
is
same
something
scene.
that we've talked about over and over on this show, is that like the way
Yeah.
a lot of the ways that mainstream media portrays Nazis ends up working in their favor,
Yeah.
and they're very much aware of that.
Yes, and this is like the prototype of that. Like this, how these people were promoted, because it also coincided like the promotion of the Satanic Panic, which really made careers of these like alternative people associated with the Church of Satan, who now portray themselves as the victims of Satanic Panic, although they were the co-creators of the whole thing, together with people like Geraldo and other like figures in American television. A parallel thing to that was the whole panic around skinheads.
Right.
And who are the skinheads, and all, glorifying them in ways that really contributed to the popularity of American Front. Like the American Front, who by their latest, not latest, but late for sure, leader, is portrayed as the kind of the anti-American third positionist group, was really made in the sleaziest American media as the group that it was. Like they recruited members from so Bob Heick, the first leader of the group in '88, he was on Geraldo, on the famous show when Geraldo's nose got broken
right.
He was there, like and interviewed a bunch of times on those types of shows, and and directly as a result of those interviews, and the American Front became a group that was, as they call it, the first national skinhead group that they had at some point in their late 80s, early 90s. They had allegedly like chapters in like 14 American states or something like that.
Yeah.
It's because they were promoted by the media
on national media, on daytime television, which was at the time a very, very big thing.
Exactly. And the other component was that they were helped by these people who were these kind of more media savvy, let's say them, let's call them intellectuals, who were not boneheads, who were like fascist, crypto fascist people, who later found like publishing houses like the Feral House and like and who were people in the industrial scene and so on, who were closely associated with them and who had access to media that the boneheads wouldn't have, and used them like in a more kind of conscious way to promote them. Like Adam Parfrey, the guy who founded Feral House, which is like a quite influential publishing house. They publish all kinds of stuff, like edgy stuff, let's say, but also like they published the book, the famous book on American hardcore that there's a documentary about.
Yeah.
They also actually published John Zerzan's books and so on.
Yeah.
But Adam Parfrey was a crypto fascist, quite obviously. So and he was good friends with Bob Heick and consciously like promoted the cause of the American Front by writing articles about them in magazines that wouldn't be available to a Nazi skinhead, But
Right.
and he like we talked about how liberals portray skinheads in a way that are benefit them, and someone like Adam Parfrey consciously like abused this tendency of the liberals. He actually wrote articles that consciously kind of and deliberately promoted the American Front. Like I will talk about it later in the how he did it in a very concrete way. Okay, so they were like in the late 80s, early 90s. There was articles about the American front in the like Rolling Stone magazine, in
Mm.
Hustler, in Sassy magazine. I think that maybe Parfley wrote in Sassy about them, but I'm not sure. He wrote an article in one of these like
Yeah,
kind of
Rolling Stone's
mainstream.
a big deal. Hustler,
Yeah.
is a
Well,
target audience, but
sure. Yeah. So they are early on kind of defined themselves as third positionists.
mhm.
Even in the late 80s, they did.
So from the
Uh,
get go, basically.
yes. But this was like a more I think this was the influence of Tom Metzger,
Mm.
because as you remember when he talked about him, he also kind of already in the 80s kind of talked about himself as a kind of a stress right Nazi, something like that.
Hmm.
But it was a different kind of, it was not like I don't know, some kind of an it was not an anti-Hitler position, let's say. It was like a position that said, like, okay, we are the working class movement who criticizes capitalism, and we use the term third position in not to call ourselves Nazis. Like
Right.
the American Front in the beginning, because they grew out of this pro-Reaganite patriotic Nazi punk movement,
Hmm.
let's say, they didn't want to call themselves Nazis or be openly about Hitler. So they use the term third position as a cover, I would say,
Hmm.
to have some quasi pro working class politics, as like a skinhead movement that identifies with the working class and so on.
So I mean,
So it's
it's like they want to be edgelords, but not edgelords to the degree of the like outright Nazi swastika wearers that nobody
no,
likes.
no. So the American Front absolutely at the beginning meant American patriotism, but it also meant like working class patriotism against the migrants or something like this.
Right.
This is and this is what they meant by third position. Is like this is the. I mean, it just means fascism. Like it's just like a fascist critique of capitalism,
Right.
of plutocracy or whatever. So they quickly, progressed from this patriotic punk scene to Nazism. Okay. So what they would do in San Francisco was they would do May 1st events. Today is May 1st.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So they were kind of known for that. They tried to do the most successful one they did was the first one they did. It was in '88. They called it the White Workers Day, and it was in the Haight
Hmm.
Street
Haight
of
Ashbury.
San Francisco. Haight, I guess,
Mhm.
is how. So I don't know the street itself, I think. And there were 65 participants, and this was their most successful rally that they ever had.
I mean, okay,
Um,
65 participants is,
yes,
probably about the same amount as like, a lot of leftist groups that consider themselves pretty
sure,
serious too.
yes,
So,
yes. But this was the peak of their group.
okay.
It was '88, their White Workers' Day in the San Francisco with 65% participants there, and they were like they were praised by Metzger at the time.
I mean, it does
Um,
sound very Metzger.
yes,
Yeah.
they made an alliance with Metzger at the time. So Metzger, Tom Metzger, who came out of the John Birch Society and then became a Nazi. He's an old man, and then he got this idea. Okay, there are these skinheads now who are Nazis. Let's make some kind of an alliance with them. And so he promoted them in his tabloid newspaper called War, and he promoted Heick specifically as the national leader of skinheads in America, something like that. So this is where this whole idea comes out of, that they are the skinhead organization. Parallel to that, they were featured on TV and in mainstream magazines and so on. So really, kind of the mainstream society really helped them create this myth of what they were. So by 1989, allegedly they had like 14 chapters in 14 U.S. states. So it came out of just a couple of boneheads in San Francisco, and through this promotion, through Nazi media and mainstream media, like in 2 years or less than that, they have allegedly these 14
Now,
chapters.
did they have like, I don't know, some sort of admission policy, or did you have to? Was there like a kind of hierarchical structure? Bob Heick or whatever was the leader, but did they have a membership or what? Or like you just contact them, and be like, we opened a chapter, and
I think it
whatever
was mostly like that.
Cedar
They
Rapids.
they had some positions like East Coast leader, West Coast leader, like by
Okay.
regions, something like that. But it's mostly like skinhead gang kind of way of organizing,
Right.
I would say. I don't think they had like Hike. Is that how you pronounce his name?
It's what, Heike?
Yeah,
Hike, Heike, Hakey, Hake,
Hike. I don't know.
Maybe Bob Hike. I don't know.
Hike, I would say. I don't know. He had a tour, like after the organization was started, he had a tour visiting chapters across the country. But this was like post, like already them existing. He wanted to get to know the members, who got to know them through the media. Because he was a big fan of Screwdriver, as he would say in interviews, what they did early on was organize concerts. So they wanted to be a part of that, kind of skinhead punk hardcore scene. And that's where they hooked up with Metzger, and where they had immediately a conflict with Tom Metzger, because they did the concert. I think it was 88 or 89. They did this concert near Napa in California, and so Tom Metzger wanted to be the boss of it. Although these were like Nazi skinheads and punks, but Tom Metzger, who's this old man from the John Birch Society, wanted to, like, who knows nothing about any kind of subculture, wanted to organize these concerts and be the main guy. So he decided to call it the Aryan Woodstock, and this was the big point of conflict between Tom Heick and and Bob Heick and Tom Metzger, of course, because, like, can you imagine, like,
Woodstock's a bunch of hippies?
Yes, like he remembers when he was like in the John Birch Society, the kids like Woodstock, so
that's rock and roll. Rock and roll is Woodstock, yeah.
And of course, Heick hated that idea of calling something that he wants to organize a Nazi festival associated with Woodstock. Okay?
I mean, especially since they're coming out of like San Francisco, right? And like, the punks there don't like hippies to begin with, and then just insult to injury is calling it. Is calling it Woodstock.
They come out of the scene that says "Hail Reagan," okay, and now they're like Hitler, and this guy tells them, "Let's call it Aryan Woodstock." Like, it's in instant conflict. And in the end, the Aryan Woodstock was like banned by the police. It was like some, I think Heick was the official organizer, so he had to appear before the judge or something like that. Although Metzger kind of took over it from him. In the end, they allowed them to have the event, but without any music. So you can imagine how the Aryan Woodstock was like 300 skinheads showing up, and then because it was on private property, and then the cops kind of sealed out the property. Others who showed up couldn't enter. They only allowed 300 people, which is a lot.
That's a lot of people, yeah.
But they were not allowed to have any music.
So what? They're just standing around with their hands in their pockets, snapping their braces.
Yes.
Shining each other's boots or something. I don't know.
That's the legendary Aryan Woodstock. Yes. Not quite as Woodstock was, but yeah, it's just 300 skinheads surrounded by cops in silence.
That sucks.
Yeah. And like, allegedly there were many more people who wanted to attend, but who were not allowed by the cops to attend. So I don't know. That's quite a lot of people. But I think the media helped promote the whole event. Okay. So it quite quickly went downhill from that. In 1990, they tried to hold a demo for the 1st of May in San Francisco at Union Square, but there was much more counter-protesters. There was like 300 people there, like the anti-fascist, anti-racist, and like, I don't know, 20 of them or something like that. And the anti-racists were throwing stuff at them and at the cops as well. The cops were protecting the American front. This great working class movement there on the 1st of May. In 91, they moved the event to Portland. So the Nazi punks did fuck off to Portland then. And there was a much larger counter protest, but there was no violence in that year. In 92, allegedly, Heick attended Ruby Ridge.
Whoa, okay.
So I think, is that where also, what's the name of the guy? Oklahoma City bomber. I think he was there as well, maybe. I don't know.
McVeigh?
Timothy McVeigh, yeah. I'm not sure. He was in one of these like kind of big mythological events of the 90s American.
I mean, McVeigh, I don't know if McVeigh ever said that he was at Ruby Ridge.
He was one.
Ruby
maybe
Ridge
he
was like was one of his like motivations for taking revenge on the federal government.
Okay.
Waco, Ruby Ridge. Yeah.
So Heick was there allegedly.
Like during the siege, or
yeah, he was like, I think a bunch of like right wingers and Nazis went there to show support or something like that. He was one of them.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, was the negotiations were done by Bo Greitz, who we talked about a couple months ago. Our favorite former special forces right wing lunatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Green Berets or something.
Green Beret. Yeah.
So in 89, Adam Parfrey, who's like an influential person, as we said, the founder of Feral House, he wrote the text in Hustler about the American front. And this is like, when you read it, it's clearly like a pro-American front propaganda using the stupidity of the liberal media, but in a very conscious way to promote Nazis. Like he writes about them as these Aryan heroes who like are street warriors who bash degenerates, like they bash queer people, they bash left-wingers, whatever. And he really praises Bob Heick, who is his friend, by the way, as like top skinhead leader in the US. He calls him like King Skin or something like that. He really makes him out of a like hero. He also lies how there are so many girls involved with the skinheads, so they're making them very attractive to young men, something like that. It's really like a promotion for the Nazis, for them. In some interviews in the like early 90s, 80s, Bob Heick would say himself how in the 80s American front people were supported by cops. He would say that.
Sure.
How cops love the American front because they saw them as someone who was confronting, as he would say, black drug dealers. And then he would say something like, well, sure, they were using us, but what the fuck, like something like that.
Now, did the American front go out and confront drug dealers? Is this something that they were doing, or is this in principle they said that they were going to do things like that?
I think if they actually did that, they would mention something about it.
Right.
Like the only time
what I thought. Yeah.
I think the only time it was mentioned, it's in the context of why the cops loved them.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Because they saw them as confronting black drug dealers. Like he never mentions anything like actually doing something like that. And he has like some. There is like he gives like a fictional like history of him becoming a Nazi. And it's like, and it's completely like fictional. You can see it. It's like basically like, I mean, it's the old American racist story. It's like the archetype. He says how
he was
a
white girl,
exactly,
white girlfriend got assaulted or
Exactly.
something by blacks.
Exactly.
And then
Exactly.
okay, yeah. I mean, this is
He became a Nazi when he was in high school, and he defended a female friend from black assaulters. And this is how he was radicalized to become a Nazi. Not only that, but his liberal parents threw him out of home because of that.
yeah. I mean, this is just it's Birth of a Nation. It's the story.
Exactly.
Of,
yes.
Yeah. Every lynching. I mean, yeah. Of course.
And he says how this started a whole campaign in the school, and there was some kind of a wider conflict. And he says himself, like, his own parents disowned him because of this.
Mm-hmm.
And he says this is because they were liberals, which is like, I think probably something else happened there. It seems like a different thing happened there.
Or he was just a racist, and his parents were like, "Damn."
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
We produced this guy.
Maybe it didn't probably disown him. They just told him, like, maybe, I don't know, you should find a job or something like that. But he was like a victim, of course, of the racist system in America.
Yeah.
So they were very aggressive. Early, like 90s, they were very aggressive. And Bob Heick, sorry, doesn't seem like a very smart person. So I shared with you the photo that we absolutely have. It's a photo of Bob Heick trying to look like a swastika.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's both reminiscent of, like, I don't know, Musk trying to make an X with his body. But then also, like, very, very, if a Nazi was trying to vote.
Yes.
He has like the fingerless gloves, and he's like striking a pose.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We have to.
I'm not going to sully Paris is Burning by even like trying to make a joke about that, but
No. I think it's a copyrighted photograph, but I think we'll need to share it at least on Patreon or something like that, because it's Bob Heick looks like an absolute moron in that. I mean, it's like, I'm sorry to use that kind of language, but it's like, for me, it's like, as being a person from the Balkans, is absolutely not racially possible for me not to use some ableist language to describe this photograph. I mean, it's just, that's the best I can do is absolute moron.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. I mean, the funniest thing that he thought he looked cool somehow. That's like, I don't know. It's a funny photo.
It's very funny.
Yes.
Are his nails painted? Sorry, or is that just the shadowing?
So,
I think it's the shadow.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That's why I say he looks more like a punk than like a skinhead. Like.
He's got the white laces or some color laces and the boots, and
he wanted to be the leader of the skinheads, but to me, he seemed like a Nazi punk from San Francisco. Somehow.
Yeah. No, I mean, to some extent, I can see it looks more like a kind of industrial look than it does either punk or skinhead to me.
Well, he was best friends with Boyd Rice at the time.
Yeah, I think it shows.
Which we'll talk in the next episode we'll record. But yeah, he was like Boyd Rice was basically a member of the American Front. So they were doing this like 1st of May march for a few years. They also like desecrated a Holocaust memorial.
Oh,
and
lovely.
Things like that. So in one of the interviews from that time, Bob Heick said something like, there's going to be tribes, barbarism. We got to take this land back from...
beep.
No, actually, okay, it's not beep. We got to take this land back from Canada to Rio Grande. All of it. You don't... So it's kind of
strange wording, yeah.
Yeah. You don't need the other races. And listen to the point now. Nietzsche didn't sit around and listen to saxophone music.
Oh.
Okay. So this is the big brain we're dealing with. Nietzsche didn't listen to
What's that
jazz,
supposed to mean? Nietzsche, yeah.
I don't know. He's a moron, I think. What it means.
But what's his point? Nietzsche didn't sit around listening to whatever the fuck they listened to. Nietzsche didn't listen to Screwdriver either. I mean, what's his point? I don't understand.
No. I think he thinks that Nietzsche was some kind of a warrior or something like that. He's confused.
Okay. All right.
So in '92, there was an article in Village Voice about the American Front. Uh, a woman from a member of the American Front from San Francisco was interviewed. It's kind of a reportage called Liz B. And who was 22 years old. And she was the last American Front female member in San Francisco in '92, and there were 9 other men who were members of the American Front by '92 who were still in San Francisco. Everyone else moved out.
Okay, that's a pretty steep decline from, I guess, their height of 60 something that they could muster.
Yes, and the last demo they did for the 1st of May only had like 13 participants and 200 entry races. So on that occasion, Bob Heick was hit on the head by a battery that was thrown, and so he bled a lot, and cops had to protect him.
Oh, nothing like the old battery.
Yes,
hucking batteries at Nazis, classic pastime.
So they moved their headquarters to Portland. By the way, Liz B, because they kind of portray themselves as the working class movement, which goes back kind of to the first, post-war Nazi group in America, the Colombians, who call themselves the workers' movement. These people are doing the same thing, but they're kind of portraying themselves as third positionists,
right?
Because it's completely new. Like that's what fascism. You always say that, that you're the workers' movement. So, by the way, Liz B came from a very rich family. She attended a boarding school and went to Oxford University in England. So yeah, that's the American workers movement there. By the way, a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about now, I got it from the material that was sent to us by Spencer Sunshine. So I just want to thank him. There's lots of interesting stuff that he sent to us, and I definitely recommend to everyone to read his book on neo-Nazi terrorism and the influence of James Mason's siege. Like, if you listen to this podcast, you should definitely read to that book.
Absolutely.
And we'll talk about in the next episodes more about that book, and eventually we'll interview Spencer as well.
Yeah.
So one of the things that he sent to me was this article from Sassy magazine from '89 about American Front, and this is the article where there are these infamous photos of Boyd Rice together with Bob Heick, both wearing American Front uniforms. And so the article itself was written by a woman reporter, which is important because of what I'm gonna about to read to you. So in the article it says, it's raining in San Francisco and Bob Heick is clicking his heels together. I'm singing in the rain, he breaks into song as we walk down the street. Just singing he turns to me and suddenly gets very serious. Come on, sing with me. I can't sing, I say, laughing. But he doesn't laugh. Sing, damn it, or I'm leaving right now. Suddenly the tone is completely serious. He stops in his tracks and cocks his head forward, invading my space and looking straight in my eyes, really angrily. Bob is the leader of the American Front, one of the largest, most bloodthirsty Nazi youth groups in the country. At the age of 21, he's been arrested so many times for assorted acts of violence and vandalism. He stopped counting at 50. I mean, this is...
And he's no Gene Kelly, I'll tell you that.
So I get just a bit intimidated as he raises his eyebrows and leans so close I can't feel. I can feel his breath. Well, he says, "Come on, Bob." I say, I guess. I don't even sing for my closest relatives. His eyes stay fixed on me. I bite my lip and rub my feet together. There is too long a silence. Just do it, he says, dead seriously. I try to gather up the courage. I know the words. What's the big deal? But I can't. And so on. He basically
that's
threatens
weird.
her. Yeah. And then what his close friend Boyd Rice and him proceed to do is they get out their knives and they kind of put their knives into her face and
are they doing like the old timey tough guy thing where they pull out the butterfly knife and they're like swinging it around? Hey, what do you?
Yes.
Give me a lunch money, twerp.
That's exactly what they were doing. And the photos, the infamous photos of both of these losers, like with their knives in their hands, is like threatening this reporter, or trying to impress her, or both, probably.
Yeah. You're
so
square. You like fucking singing in the rain, don't you? Here's my knife, bitch.
yes. So these are the people that we're talking about. So what's also interesting, they're telling to her, this is not interesting, but I just remembered, they're trying to dare her to touch their blade.
Yeah, yeah.
Something
Okay.
like
I mean,
that.
this is
Yeah.
like, it's movie stereotype, like tough guy,
Yeah.
bad boy shit from like 80s movies, which like a
Yes.
lot of these guys did actually think of themselves, like identify with those roles, which like, you know, just
Exactly.
tells you a little bit more about their character for sure. But like it's
Yes.
super cringy now, I guess, but it might have looked cool to somebody back then.
I don't know. I guess. So in that interview, they talk about how they support the assassination of Ellen Berg, and they love the order
Okay.
and things like that. Both Boy Doris and him do. They deny the Holocaust and so on. You know, the usual. So what's also interesting for us is that they are really making history here now, because they are outside of James Mason's fictional groups that he had at the time. This is the first group that like embraces James Mason in Siege.
Okay.
Like before Siege was a thing. I mean, the zine existed, but the book didn't.
Right.
So among these things that Spencer Sunshine sent to us are also letters that Bob Heick and other members of the American Front wrote to James Mason as fans.
Wow. Okay.
Before Siege was a book. Okay. So, for example, Bob Heick writes to James Mason how Rick Cooper, if you remember, we refer to him as Cooper the Pooper.
Cooper the Pooper, yeah. Just refresh our memory.
He was
the American Nazi Party guy.
He was the leader of one of the splinter groups from American Nazi Party, who some other Nazis accused of eating shit.
Right.
So this is why we refer to him as Cooper the Pooper.
Yeah.
So Bob Heick, writing to James Mason, says, Rick Cooper gave me his complete collection of Siege, and this is my most prized material possession, is what Bob Heick writes to James Mason.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah. And interestingly, this is now the early 90s. In this letter, he mentions one Jim Porrazzo as a big fan of James Mason, and said, you know that Jim would publish anything you wrote. You know, if just you want to send us something, Jim would publish it.
I always wondered if they called him Jim. Sorry, it's been on my mind for a while now.
Porrazzo, they did call him Jim.
Okay, good.
Or
because I was going to call him Jimothy.
Yeah. So as he says, Jim Porrazzo is your biggest fan, and he would definitely publish anything you write. He mentions Porrazzo specifically because Porrazzo is one of the kind of co-leaders of the American Front at the time, and he also is editing and publishing his own American Front newspaper called Grey Storm, by the way.
Grey Storm?
Grey Storm, yes, okay. One word. This is and he says, Jim would publish anything you write if you want to. And also Bob Heick offers even to start his own newspaper as a vehicle to James Mason's text, if only Mason wants to write something. This is like end of 93, beginning of 94, so we are in the 90s already.
Okay.
And so Mason replies to this, and he says, James Mason replies, like, he refers to, like, he says, like, Eva left a mess when she left. Like, he immediately refers to his teenage girlfriend who left him, and, like, she had this Latino lover, and there was almost like some kind of a gunfight between them, and then this is all. So he says, Eva left a mess, and in this mess, like, I barely found your letter or something like this.
Eva left a mess, and I barely found your letter.
Exactly. Yes. And he says, damn it if I know who Jim Porrazzo is. And this is
Oh man, classic Mason. Okay.
and this is like what Porrazzo will follow him. He wants Mason to know who he is, and Mason just cannot remember who he is. And previously we know that like they spoke on the phone because Porrazzo was good friends with Michael Moynihan, who the like industrial neo folk musician, a part of the Abraxas, whatever. Who's the guy who eventually edited Siege into a book,
Right.
Like, and so Porrazzo is close friends with Michael Moynihan, who made Siege into a book, and who also wrote the Lords of Chaos book that mythologizes the
Norwegian black metal, also a major motion picture.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Porrazzo is friends with this guy, and he, in one of these letters, it's referred how when James Mason was visiting Michael Moynihan, Porrazzo called Michael Moynihan, and then Moynihan gave the phone to Mason, and Mason spoke to Porrazzo. It's referred in one of the letters, like it's like Porrazzo's like, "Do you remember we had a talk?" And James says,
which one are you?
yes,
and he says like the one with the WAP name, I suppose.
Yeah, yes, and no, but Mason said something very Mason, like, yes, it was a very good visit, and the talk with you was one of the good things about that visit, or something like that. Something like that, and then keeps forgetting about who Porrazzo is.
Nice.
Later on, like people are trying to like remind him, and he never, like through the 90s, he like people are writing to him and saying, Jim would like to publish your stuff, and he's like Jim, who, like what?
I mean, okay, to be fair, I think the 90s were maybe one of like the height of James Mason's like blackout all the time.
Yeah.
Child.
Yeah. He was in prison for yes.
But one thing, okay, so we mentioned Timothy Porrazzo now a few times. Maybe we should introduce him as a character.
I'm coming to that.
Oh, you're coming to that. Okay, I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yes, I have it in my notes
of the
he's a character, and it's kind of we need to get there. Okay, so at this time he's a young member of American Front. He joined in the 80s when he was 16 years old. He comes from New York City, by the way. James, okay, I can give you some background. So Porrazzo comes allegedly, from New York City, and he was, I think I'm saying allegedly because I think he's lying a lot, but okay, maybe some of what he says is true. He comes from New York City, and he says from the like squatting scene in the New York of the 80s, and he says that he personally knew the members of the band Cro-Mags who introduced him to Hare Krishna stuff. He also says that members of his family were the members of the ODO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, the Aleister Crowley organization, so that he was introduced to occult stuff since he was born, and also that he grew up with people who used to be members of the National Renaissance Party. Which
that's checking off half of Tenepod right there.
Yeah. So like occult, quasi-satanic stuff, New York City. It makes sense if he's from New York City that he knew National Renaissance people because that's where they were based.
Yeah.
Also, like, the whole thing about American Front being the first third positionist group kind of doesn't make any sense because...
No, that's not true.
I mean, at least the National Renaissance Party was like... I mean, they were like pro-Soviet Nazis.
Yeah.
So, I mean... and there is... Himself, he says there's a direct influence from those people on him. And then there's like this kind of, Cro-Mags hardcore connection, which also kind of makes sense, and Hare Krishna influence. So that's kind of his origin, according to him. But he joined like in the late 80s American Front when he was 16. And then in the early 90s, he became one of the leaders, and he took over allegedly in 95.
Okay.
As the leader. So in the early 90s, Bob Heick gave an interview to like a Nazi group in the UK called The Order. and he defined
Really not creative with the names, huh?
No, of course not. And he defined they were not very. They were not calling themselves Nazis. Never really, although they clearly were that. So in this interview, he defines themselves like the American Front. Although he's giving the interview to like absolute Nazis, like in the UK, but he says that they are revolutionary nationalists, and he uses the name revolutionary nationalist and also like racial nationalist, something like this.
Okay.
And he says in the interview how they agree with National Socialist radical racial ideas, but not with economical ideas, is what Bob Heick says. So they are more into like the Strasserism and more critical of capitalism than Hitler was, is what he wants to say. But then he says we are absolutely against any kind of green national front or Nazi bashing. And so I was confused by this, but I think he refers to because the National Front was kind of dissolving in the UK at the time, and in many different factions, and there was this political soldier, so-called faction of the National Front, who adopted this third positionist perspective. And I think Bob Heick wants to distance from them because these people at the time were saying things against Hitler, I think. And I think they're called green, not because of ecology, but because they adopted Gaddafi's Green Book.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah. I remember reading about this. Right. Yeah. Okay.
And so one of their leaders at the time was Nick Griffin, later the
Yeah.
leader of the British National Party, who went to Troy Southgate also was one of them, later founder of national anarchism. And they went to Libya trying to get Gaddafi to give them some money. There are actually photos of them in Libya and so on. So I think he's referring to that, how they are not supporting Green National Front as going too far in their Hitler bashing, although they are third positionists, and also says to disqualify them as the National Front that's like pro ANC, African National Congress, and pro IRA.
Right.
Like we are not for that,
right? Because Libya was supporting the IRA at the time, and
Yes,
that's a
and-
big thing if you're in the National Front. I mean, Screwdriver had the song "The Smash the IRA." I mean, it's
Yes.
not exactly a position that you want to be.
Yes,
in.
and this political soldier group actually did like kind of flirt with some pro IRA stuff because they were also like traditionalist Catholics for some reason.
Oh, okay.
So they had their own thing going on.
But
It's
they were
quite
English?
crazy. They were English, traditionally Catholics, because they had this ideologue who was crazy called Derek Holland, who was like a traditionalist Catholic. And, I think it was a connection also with that. We had Tradcat episodes.
Yeah.
There was that English Nazi Tradcat bishop.
Yeah, right.
I think they had a connection with him at the time, and it was stuff going on in their heads.
Yeah.
But soon afterwards, Troy Southgate, who was a member of the that faction, like they were first called the Political Soldier Faction of the National Front. Then they formed their own group, which was called ITP, International Third Position. And then Troy Southgate separated himself from that and formed something which was called the National Revolutionary Faction, which became later on in the 90s the ally of the American Front under Jim Porrazzo and the National Bolshevik Party, Dugin and so on, and which adopted more a kind of a Satanist and occult attitude.
Okay.
So
That's a lot right there that you just said. I'll just.
Yeah. So for this reason, ITP they did a pamphlet that Spencer Stanchion sent me, which is like it's like an anti-Satanist pamphlet that the International Third Position did. No, the Tradcat,
Right.
English Tradcat fascist. It's about like, I don't remember the title, but it's about the Satanist menace infiltrating, fascist scene. And they write about, so it's in the 90s, and they attack groups like the one founded by the Troy Southgate. They mention David Mamet. They mention the American Front. They mentioned the National Renaissance Party and all of these people who are the like occultist, Satanists.
So at this point,
influenced,
the American Front is kind of being associated with this kind of Satanist faction
this
by
is
some other
this is
Nazis.
so after they kicked out Bob Heick,
Right.
which probably happens in 95. I think Bob Heick might be dead now. I'm not sure. But he was kicked out of the party in 95. After that, and maybe sometime before that, Porrazzo starts to steer them more into that direction of like occult weird shit. And he's a big, he says that he grew up among National Renaissance. He's from New York, and like National Renaissance Party,
millions of people
ODO
are from New York. It doesn't
sure, but he's from this like Nazi adjacent
Supposedly, yeah.
scenes
Yeah, yeah.
somehow, yeah. Hare Krishna, National Renaissance Party, Church of Satan stuff. I don't know. Is like what he says. So, but they also have they have some connections. They're kind of interesting because they have a uniform. The American Front does.
No, okay. We haven't had a good uniform in a while.
They wear black pants and gray shirts, and they call themselves gray shirts. And they say in interviews how this is a reference to Pelly's silver shirts.
Oh, okay.
So they also make a connection.
Silver
with
shirts
that.
might be a little bit too flamboyant for them in the 90s. They went gray.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, might too hippie, I guess. I don't know, too psychedelic. Okay. So I guess for this reason, Porrazzo, publishes his own American Front newspaper that's called Grey Storm, I guess. So in Grey Storm, Porrazzo, who took over, I said middle 90s, and he says how in some interviews, he says how they kicked out Bob Heick out of the group because he was not able to adjust ideologically to the new course.
Okay.
So in Grey Storm, Porrazzo promotes Siege immediately after it became a book. There's like a whole page like advertisement for Siege, and I think early on there was some kind of coexistence between Heick and him. So there is like in Grey Storm there's a text by Heick which is called Universal Order, which is also the name of James Mason's project at the time.
Sure, yeah.
It's like he's pro Charles Manson kind of ideological National Socialist project at the time. So American Front is also firmly kind of pro Charles Manson as well.
Okay. So they've come back around to the maybe kind of quasi hippie thing.
Yes.
Now
Tom
they might be
Metzger
okay with the Aryan Woodstock as long as it's the sex is a reflection of this kind of Woodstock.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes. I mean, in the end, like Tom Metzger also came around to being pro Charles Manson and pro James Mason after he was, sued by Zog and destroyed financially, and was just a loser. He what he had left to do is just adopt Siege.
Yeah,
he was Siege built by Zog in the end. So they were all, I think, around 95. They were all kind of on the same page, which is like kind of interesting, that James Mason has this prehistory that goes to early 90s, and it's connected like really with these like kind of hipster crypto Nazi types and the skinheads, who one of which was James Porrazzo, as the early adopter in the skinhead scene, who really, really promoted that and wrote to James Mason and tried to get Mason to remember his name, which was futile, and so on. And also, so in Grey Storm, Porrazzo also publishes like poems by Carl Hand, who's one of the leaders of the NSLF, the National Socialist Liberation Front.
Okay, yeah. We talked about in the California episodes. Yeah,
that's the group that inspired James Mason to,
right.
Siege was originally like the newspaper of the NSLF.
Yeah.
Porrazzo is good friends with Michael Moynihan. He's often mentioned in this correspondence with Mason. Also, in the 90s, like USA Today does kind of a series of television reports on the racist youth of America. And one of those is focused on the American Front, and it's basically an interview with Heick and Boyd Rice like walking around the town and like drawing swastikas and being idiots and so on. So that actually the video of that exists. And on that occasion, Boyd Wright is also like wearing the American Front uniform, and he's being introduced as a member of the American Front.
Okay.
So kind of the height of American Front and Heick's involvement in that hipster scene was in 88. That was when they did that. We'll talk about that in the future episode, but they did this like kind of event in San Francisco called, it was on the 8th of August of 88. So it's 8888. It was kind of a Church of Satan adjacent hipster arty Nazi event they did. And it's like a bunch of these people attending: Adam Parfrey, Boyd Wright, Nicholas Schreck, Zena LaVey, daughter of Anthony Chandler LaVey, and all of these people, including Bob Heick and like a lot of these Nazis. So there's like photographs of them all Zig Heiling together and happy and doing stupid shit like that. The American Front was also the first group that reprinted James Mason's political terror flyer. That's like one of his like iconic, siege culture flyers about political terror. It's like
right. That's
it's kind of a quasi kind of Maoist, like kind of but Nazi iconography that he used. So American Front reprinted that as their own thing. Michael Moynihan also made Michael Moynihan, is also like all of these people are artists from this scene. So he designed posters for the American Front, and at some point he stayed. I don't know if he stayed with Bob Heick. Yeah, I guess Bob Heick in '89, and they were putting up these posters together, and they both got arrested. So Moynihan actually got arrested for putting up American Front posters in '89 in San Francisco, and he also designed T-shirts for the American Front. In '96, the band, what is the name? You know it, Electric Hellfire Club.
Yeah, Electric Hellfire Club. Just kind of generic industrial bands. Dude was previously affiliated with My Life with a Thrill Kill Cult, I think.
Yeah, he was also part of that. So in '96, they had an album called Calling Dr. Love, and Bob Heick appeared on that album. I think James Mason is also like, there's like a thank you note for James Mason on that album. They were like a guy, Thomas Thorne or something like that, who's the leader of that band, was friends with James Mason and part of this whole Abraxas scene. Also, like previously we mentioned the guy called Keith Steinley. He was affiliated with Liberty Lobby and Institute for Historical Review. He died in like the early 90s. He was the guy who originally was supposed to write a book about Yoki, but died before doing so. And connected to all of these people, he was also like connected to the Abraxas scene, like a Liberty Lobby guy who also like played on some albums with Michael Moynihan and so on.
Crazy.
And he also, just before he died, but he was like a publicity agent. He was writing a text about Bob Heick that he tried to publish in some mainstream or semi-mainstream newspaper, but he died before he was able to do that. There was a period in the 90s when both, I think, Bob Heick and James Porrazzo were both members of the American Front. I think it was like 93 to 95. I think that in some interviews, Porrazzo says that he took over in 93. Somewhere it says it's 95. I don't know. But some other places, he says that Bob Heick was kicked out of American Front in 95 because he wasn't able to make an ideological adjustment, something like that.
Okay.
So we can say that, from 95...
they had a crisis of leadership, I guess you'd say.
Yes. So Porrazzo, when he took over, he wanted firmly to define the American Front as a third positionist group more firmly than Heick did, although Heick also did that, but in more this kind of Tom Metzger adjacent way, I would say. So But also, Porrazzo was not original in any of that, because he would say things like, we are closer to black nationalists and the Nation of Islam and the new Black Panther Party than we are to the KKK or so on.
Mm-hmm.
But already the Rockwell already had connections with the Nation of Islam. It's like it's not a new thing.
Yeah, he was drawing on a previously existing tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
American Nazis did that already in the 60s,
Right.
It's not like, So at first, Porrazzo would, he was openly anti-Semitic, of course. He's a Nazi. Later, he would kind of pretend that he wasn't. But he would write early on things like that the American Front is a revolutionary organization whose aim is to secure national freedom and social justice for white people in North America. An important part of this goal is also making sure our people's cultural and racial identity is preserved. We see the creation of the National Revolutionary Nation, so it's a national nation, on the soil of North America as the stepping stone against race mixing, because we recognize it as a destabilizing force culturally and physically, is what Porrazzo wrote when he took over. So universally, he's seen as a poor leader of the group, even worse than Heick was, the swastika man. He alienated a lot of people who were previously supporters of Heick and his associate called Thomas Johnson, I think, calling them openly hypocritical and so on. So infighting plagued the American front when Porrazzo took over. And universally, it's seen that by the early 2000s, Porrazzo really destroyed the group and ran it into the ground. And it was mostly inactive.
So what, from 95 to 2000, Porrazzo was in control, but
2002.
So 95 to 2002, Porrazzo is the leader of the American Front, but he kind of drives the whole organization into the ground.
Yes, but he comes back later. It's an interesting story. He comes back around 2007-8, something like that. So at this time he was saying, how they have more in common with Nation Islam and KKK. He also claims in interviews how he did stuff with Earth First and ALF, which is, those are not organizations, so any schmuck can say that they did something with them and lie about it, which is what he did. And at the time, they aligned themselves with a phantom group calling themselves European Liberation Front, which is a group that took the name from the group originally founded in the 50s by Yoki, if you remember. When we talked about him, he had the ELF originally, which was like this kind of pro-Soviet Nazi group that existed. So these people take the name as the name for their international, and they have also something called the Liaison Committee for Revolutionary Nationalism for non-Europeans, and the American Front becomes a part of that. And the other groups that are part of that are the National Revolutionary Faction, which is a tiny group led by Troy Southgate when he leaves the international third position. At the time when he maybe shares a P.O. box with David Mamet, as some people said. Also, the National Bolshevik Party of Limonov and Dugin are part of that, and a group calling themselves the New Resistance in France, led by this guy called Boucher, who is also like a follower of Aleister Crowley and a former member of the National Front there. So they're like occultists, National Bolshevik types that Porrazzo affiliates with them in the mid 90s.
Yeah, and this is when like National Bolshevism is like a hot kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. On the scene.
Yeah. So in about that time, in the like 93, 94, Porrazzo writes to James Mason, addressing him as "Dear Mr. Mason, racial greetings." He tries to get Mason to remember him. Remember, we spoke on the phone and so on. And he writes something like, "You're truly an inspiration. Hail victory. if you have anything to write, please send me. And he sends him his zine Rainstorm and says, like, your criticism would be very appreciated and so on. And he also advertises, Siege, which was edited by his good friend Michael Moynihan at the time. So he kind of sees it as a part of the whole third positionist National Bolshevik thing. He sees James Mason Siege ideology as a part of that. And actually, Troy Southgate's group kind of uses the same slogan. The flyer that I mentioned is also kind of reproduced by them in England with a little bit different text, but it's also kind of obviously, Siege influenced. So in interviews, so Porrazzo was quite kind of a pretentious person. So he would say things like, we dropped the skinhead subculture because it was a dead end path, something like that, which is like a stupid thing to say as a leader of a skinhead group. Like you're the leader of the group that's known as the first national group of skinheads, and then you take over and say skinhead's a bunch of idiots and it's a dead end path. Of course, you will destroy your group, which is exactly what he did.
Sure. Yeah.
Also, it was a kind of, I think, later on rationale because the organization fell apart, and then he was like, we dropped that subculture because it was dead end, because it ended
Because
for
it was
him.
already failing. Yeah.
Yeah, when he said that, it already didn't exist. It already failed.
Right.
So he claimed, how he was this kind of revolutionary figure, Porrazzo did, how he fought both the Antifa, he would later say, what he actually meant was the anti-racist action in the 90s, and the reactionaries, meaning the Nazis who were against him, who were other leaders of the American front who didn't want to go into his direction. So, he aligned his ideology with Dugin and things like that already in the 90s. And Islamic resistant movements, this was this time when American Nazis were going into that direction. Yeah. And this backfired big time after, 9/11.
9/11. Yeah, they were all super into the Islamist shit until 9/11, and then some of them had to kind of revise their positions.
Yes. So he basically destroyed the group with his infighting and nonsense. And then, he blamed it on 9/11. So he said that, there was heavy state harassment after 9/11 because of their pro-Islamic attitude. And so what he says, it's very comical. What he says, in 2002, we went into tactical hibernation.
Okay. Okay. That's one way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can imagine him being in tactical hibernation, what that means. So he basically disappeared. So other leaders of the American front who took over after that, he said that he basically disappeared.
So the American front did continue after Porrazzo?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, it did continue. It kind of reverted to what it always was, which was just a skinhead gang. And it was taken over by, like, non-nerd boneheads.
Sure, yeah.
So let me see.
And presumably the type of non-nerd boneheads who weren't like making human swastikas and all that kind of fun stuff.
Just,
like just
classical
classic Nazi
classic
skins.
American boneheads. I'm just gonna switch to that because there is the kind of a split now because Porrazzo's story kind of ends here, but also it continues later. We're gonna end with him, but in between, from 2002 until 2007, as we said, the American Front reverts to being just a bonehead group. And which in essence it always was, but it was just a bonehead group that was led by nerds who had a connection with like crypto,
who had
Nazi
pretensions
hipsters.
to something bigger, like being part of this kind of whole third positionist movement of like kind of cool weirdos that are smart.
Yeah. So in 2002, David Lynch takes over. So it's a lesser known fact from David Lynch's biography that for 5 years he was, or 9 years, he was the leader of the American Front.
Okay. News to me.
Yes. So, of course, it's a different David Lynch, but he's just an American fucking bonehead.
Uh-huh.
And he did things that are typical for a bonehead. They dropped completely this third position rhetoric. They were just about, hating non-white people. Also, he did a typical thing, which is in 2004, he snitched on another Nazi
Nice.
in court. He made close connections with Blood and Honor and Combat 18. Praised David Lane, The Order, made connections with a National Vanguard, meaning what was left of the National Alliance at that time. Very anti-immigrant and homophobic, connected to the Nazi skinhead music scene. They had a band as a part of their organization called Stormtrooper 16.
Oh, yeah.
He was an Odinist. So everything about him was just bonehead.
Classic bonehead stuff, yeah.
He also died as a proper bonehead, which was in 2011 being shot in his home by other Nazis, probably. Together, so his pregnant wife was also shot, but
damn.
wounded. She didn't die. Probably because of this infighting and snitching on other Nazis and being just a gang.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the end of the David Lynch era of the American front. They became just a gang at that part, one of many Nazi gangs. So Lynch was also a part simultaneously, like at the same time, with other Nazi gangs. Like they had a close connection with a group called Volksfront and Vinlanders Social Club.
Vinlanders Social Club. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So Lynch was one of the leaders of that as well.
Okay.
So it was just like, skinhead gangs making coalitions and so on. He was also a member of the Hammerskins, had a close connection with Tom Metzger.
Yep.
There is a photograph of David Lynch with Tom Metzger. So Heick was like kind of friends with Boyd Rice. There are photographs of them together. Porrazzo was friends with Adam Parfrey. There are photos of them together. And Lynch was like his mentor, I think, was Tom Metzger. He was killed in 2011. So there was a period like of some kind of a crisis in leadership again around 2007 or 8 in the American front, which is the period when James Porrazzo reappeared and tried to take over the organization from David Lynch and the classical bonehead.
Because he was just in hibernation. He didn't leave.
Yes, because tactical hibernation. Yeah.
Right, okay.
So this is like, if you remember, when we started this podcast many years ago, we did episodes about Nazi Satanists and those weirdos.
Yes.
And we talked about, what is his name? Sutter. What is his fucking name?
Joshua Sutter.
Yes, Joshua Caleb Sutter. The Americans affiliated with the Order of Nine Angles, who had their own group called Temple of Blood. Sutter was before that one of the leaders of Aryan Nations. And as we know, in 2004, he was arrested for being a dumbass and trying to buy a gun from a Fed. And then while in prison, we now know he turned snitch. He became an informant and was dead for 20 years or something like that.
Yeah.
Getting money from the Feds and so on. So and getting money from the Feds and starting like Nazi Satanist publishing houses affiliated with the Order of Nine Angles, all kind of decrepit, horrible things that he was doing with his Fed money. So our Aryan Viking hero, Jim Porrazzo, he was arrested in 98, something like this. He says for like fighting Antifa, which is this fight that he had with some member of the anti-racist action. Mm-hmm. But he got like he got some sentence, but he didn't actually go to prison, although he always claims that this is the reason why he went to prison. But we know, like the late journalist Nate Taylor, he did some research about all of these people, and he wrote that Porrazzo actually went into prison for selling illegal growth hormones.
Oh, okay.
And so he was released from prison in 2007. This is like why he did.
So he went to jail for juicing.
Yes.
All right.
And so this is interesting because he was released from prison in 2007, And this is when he hooked up with Joshua Sutter, the informant, who was turned informant while being in prison.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is when he tries to take over his old group from David Lynch and the Boneheads. Okay. While conspiring with Sutter and people like that, which he openly says. Like he says, because some like they were so at that time he had like some kind of a group on Facebook with other national revolutionary types and so on. And it's like what they were talking about. They talked about it publicly. It's preserved somewhere. And so these are conversations in which you can see Porrazzo talking with Sutter and other people involved in this mini scene of Nazi weirdos who are into Hare Krishna and National Bolshevik stuff and so on, who are like conspiring how to take over the American front from the Boneheads. And he says, like in one of the interviews, like after consulting with friends who were outside of the American front but whose opinion we valued, we decided that we were going to try to take it over. But he even says it like to disrupt it, like to become members of it in order to destroy it and to like make something different out of it. Like he literally says like that the point of them joining again was to destroy it and to make their own group. And the group that the people that he was consulting with were the Temple of Blood people.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
And this is like you can see those conversations there. Okay, like they exist. So he has at that time I think he already had a partner who a woman coming out of American front who was in the 2000s jail for some anti-Semitic violence that she did.
Oh, that's nice.
Patney is her last name, but she is like an American front person, but obviously having a connection with making a connection with Porrazzo in this period. So there is for a time there is this kind of a war between Boneheads and these weirdo nerds who's going to take over the American front. And so
also Porrazzo is a weirdo nerd, but he's also kind of a bonehead. Like he's still like maintaining the image. Like he was always like jacked. I guess he was probably doing steroids since he was selling them. Like he tattoos. He was like he wasn't like like a straight laced kind of dude. He was trying to be a nerd.
He's trying.
Who was also a bonehead.
To me, it seems he was like trying too hard. I don't see him as an authentic bonehead. Like he was really trying from the get-go. He was like about I was influenced by Cro-Mags and my family was in the OTO, and he's a nerd.
Yeah,
like a proper bonehead wouldn't think that it's important.
Yeah, I'm just saying he's trying to like play both sides.
Yes,
yeah.
He's trying and failing.
Yeah,
like
clearly
and failing. So he with Sutter, they start together in the early 2000s. They start the new Bihar Mandir, their of quasi Hare Krishna group, which Porrazzo says that he was a part of and that he started in some interview that he did a few years ago. But he says like I did it as a favor to my friend or something like that, which doesn't make any sense. Like what does that mean? So Nate Thayer writes in his articles that Porrazzo actually in 2007 was in the trailer, the famous trailer of Joshua Sutter and the group.
Yep. This is old school Tenepod material.
Yeah, this is South Carolina trailer that was headquarters that was given by Sutter's Nazi dad to Sutter and his wife Jillian Hoy, which was the headquarters of his Aryan Nations faction, and then also of his pro North Korea group.
Yeah.
And also his was the Ruler People's Party, which was this like pro People's Temple quasi
Jim
leftist,
Jones.
Pol Pot,
Yeah.
Pol Pot, Jim Jones taught, and the Temple of Blood.
Yeah.
So Nate Thayer tells us that Porrazzo went there, met those people, was participating in those meetings, together with his, I guess, then girlfriend, later wife, Emily Putney, arrested for anti-Semitic assault, and Chris Hayes, who's his old friend from the American Front, and Gillian Hoy, the wife of Joshua Sutter. So in 2009, they had this conflict with the other faction of the crazy pro-North Korea attempts, with that guy called Jason Tonis, the guy who was a guest at Russia Today, if you remember.
Oh yeah, this
They
is
hated
old.
him.
Yeah.
They really hated him. Probably they tried maybe to kill their rival in the pro North Korea group called what was he? Jason Paul Cupp,
Yeah.
the homeless poet
Who's still around, I
allegedly-
guess.
yes,
One
they
of our
tried to
listeners
poison.
gave us some
Yeah.
info about him lately. Yeah.
So all of this is going on while simultaneously he's trying to take over or actually destroy the American front and get rid of the boneheads there, who are allegedly in their communication, because the boneheads were infiltrated by the feds. So we know about some of their internal communication. They were conspiring with Combat 18 to kill James Porrazzo at the time.
Damn.
So which we know from their communications, and they were like, they were basically, the American front at that point was Combat 18 and Blood and Honor, feuding with Jim Porrazzo, who was Temple of Blood, and
Temple of Blood / like Dugan National Bolshevik.
yes,
So it's a very weird combo.
Yes. Well, I mean, yes. But I guess the connection they had was, that Sutter was also like this edgy
Pro North Korean,
pro North Korean, pro Al Qaeda,
yeah,
anti-American while working for the feds,
yeah.
and so on. So this is going on. In 2011, David Lynch is killed at his home by other Nazis, and so the Bonehead faction, the Lynch followers, take over, who are still feuding with Porrazzo and his allies, who are the Temple of Blood. So the Mark, I guess, I don't know if he's Latin or Italian, so his last name is Faella or Faella, I don't know. Mark Faella, I guess, I don't know. Takes over, like a classical American Nazi skinhead. He becomes the new leader, and in this like communication, we see that this guy Mark is trying to conspire with Combat 18 to murder Porrazzo, and doing that conveniently, all of the Bonehead leadership of the American front gets arrested. I think this was like in 2012, 2013, I'm not sure. 2012. So the leader and 13 members in the leadership all get arrested in Florida for like